קבלו כולן את יעל.
אז היי לכולן. זה פורמט ממש מגניב, אז קודם כל אני רוצה להגיד לכולכן תודה רבה שבאתן. אני משדרת מהבידוד בעצמי, גם אני חזרתי מחול. ותודה רבה לקרינבל שארגנה את הכל, אז כל הכבוד לקרינבל. אז ההרצאה שאני הולכת להעביר עכשיו, זו הרצאה שבניתי למען מיטאפ של באות, שהיה 10 מושגים וספציפית אני מציגה את 10 מושגים בסייבר סקיוריטי. בהתחלה קראנו להרצאה 10 מושגים בסיסיים, אבל כשכתבתי את המצגת הזאת, הבנתי שאין שום דבר בסיסי במה שאני הולכת לחלוק איתכם, אז בואו נקרא לזה 10 מושגים מהותיים, עמוקים וחשובים בסייבר. ברשותכן אני הולכת לעבור לאנגלית, בעיקר כהרצאה מוקלטת, וזה יהיה לי נחמד שיהיה לי הרצאה מוקלטת באנגלית, אז אני מקווה שכולכן מרגישות עם זה בנוח. ונתחיל. Okay, so this presentation is going to be 10 fundamental cybersecurity terms. So who am I? My name is Yael Daihes, and I'm a security data science team lead at Akamai, which means I'm very privileged to do both cybersecurity and data science together. I'm very passionate about promoting women and making the high-tech world a lot more friendly for women, which is why I'm so happy to be here standing for Baot. And I'm even more lucky and privileged that I lead a team of all women. So I encourage you all to join either cybersecurity or data science community. So let the fun begin. I should warn you that cybersecurity presentations usually have a lot of memes, so I'm staying true to the form, and you're going to see a lot of memes around the presentation. Okay, so term number 1 is malware. So malware is a combination of 2 words, malicious software, and it's just like every other software you know. You wrote software in, doesn't matter what language, it can be C, C++, Python, Java, it doesn't matter the language. The whole distinction is that this software specifically has a malicious intent. So the intention of this software is to abuse your computer, to cause damage to a computer. But the whole idea is that its intention is malicious. I wanted to give an example of malicious software. This is a malware called WannaCry. It was a really widespread attack back in 2016. And this specific malware is of type called ransomware. So ransomware is a combination of another 2 words, which is ransom and malware. And the specific intent here is to cause some kind of damage to your computer and demand ransom in exchange for making your computer healthy again. So for example, this specific ransomware encrypted your entire file system and your entire computer, and they would ask for a ransom for money in return for getting your files back. So the screen you see here is an actual screenshot from the computers that were infected by this malware, which is very unfortunate. Imagine having your computer in this timeline asking you to pay for the next 6 days and 23 hours. So this is a real example. We understood what is malware, which is a malicious software, but we didn't download this software onto our computer. I didn't intend for this software to get to my computer. So how did it get here to my computer? So term number 2 I wanted to tell you about is phishing. So phishing is a play on words on phishing fish. You can see it here in the photo. But here what they're phishing for is sensitive information that belongs to you or trying to get you to do something. So phishing is a fraudulent attempt to do one of 2 things. It's either obtain sensitive information such as username, password, your credit card detail, or to get you to do something and download the malware onto your computer. And the way that they do that is by disguising themselves as a trustworthy entity. So I wanted to give a real example of phishing. So this is example number 1 of a real phishing attack. And here on the left, you see an actual email that was sent, and it looks a lot like Netflix, and you see the design and the logo, and the email says, "Dear customer, your account is blocked. Please update your payment method." And then you have this cute little button that you can click, but once you click that button, you're actually going to a link. And this link brings you to this screen, and you can input your payment card. And you're thinking, wow, it's not possible that I will come back home and not be able to watch Netflix. I have to insert my credit card details. So you put your credit card details and you're happy and going back home and watching Netflix. And essentially, you never even realized that you were giving your credit card details to an attacker. And the whole idea behind this is that they're disguising themselves as a trustworthy entity. They look like Netflix. The only way you could have noticed that it's not Netflix is by noticing that the email here is Netflix with 2 T's instead of 1. So this is an example of the objective number 1 of phishing, which is to obtain your sensitive information. Phishing example number 2 would be something like that. So let's say the attackers know you pretty well. They did their research, and they realized what specific bank you use, and that you even might get a monthly statement of your bank account. So they had all of this knowledge about you, and they're sending you a very specific email that looks exactly like what you're expecting from your bank. So it's from your bank, but from notreallyyourbank.com. And it says, "Dear customer, please find statement attached. Best regards, your bank." And attached is a PDF file. And that PDF file actually contains malicious software. So once you click that PDF and start this running of code that uploads that PDF on your screen, it's actually downloading a secondary file, a malicious file, onto your computer. So this is a second example of the second objective of what one might do with a phishing attack. And that way they could have gotten a malware installed onto your computer. But we didn't install it. Like, even if it's downloading a second file, it doesn't make sense. Like, why is it running? How is it on my machine and even doing something? Because I never double-clicked that malware. So the way to execute code or to have a software doing something that is unexpected brings me to the term number 3, which is a vulnerability. A vulnerability is a weakness in a software or a website which someone can exploit in order to do unauthorized or not planned code. And an exploit would be the software or the data or the sequence of commands that one might do to take advantage of that vulnerability. And this is all in order to perform unauthorized actions. Now, these two terms are a bit tricky. So I wanted to give an example of something that is not related to code, but is actually a vulnerability and an exploit that I found myself. So not too long ago, I was working in a company that they had a parking lot for employees. But the parking lot wasn't free for everyone daily. You had to grab a ticket from the parking machine and then go to an office and grab a sticker that is a barcode that you actually cover the original ticket. And then once you leave the parking lot, you just put the ticket with a sticker on inside the machine, and then it lets you go out. But before it goes out, it brings you back the card that you just used. So one of those days, I had my routine. I took my car. I was getting out of the parking lot, and I accidentally inserted the wrong ticket. It was actually the previous day ticket with a previous day sticker, but it still opened up. And I'm like, oh my God, this is magic. And then I realized there were 2 bugs in this process. The first bug is they didn't change the sticker that you need to use in order to get a free parking. And the second bug was that it's bringing me back my ticket that I just used. So I was like, okay, I understood the vulnerability here. How can I make my life easier? I'm going to exploit it. So the exploit was to do this one time and get one-time ticket with a sticker on it, and then just use the same ticket with the same sticker every day. Instead of having to walk up the office and grab a sticker, I didn't need that. So I just used that ticket. And then for a full year, I used the same ticket. So this is how I found a vulnerability and an exploit to do unauthorized action, right? No one planned for this execution to be able to be valid. And the second example, which I wanted to give, is more cyber-related, is a very well-known exploit called Eternal Blue. So this exploit was actually used in order to infect machines with WannaCry, the malware that I gave you an example for before. And this specific vulnerability was found by the NSA. So this sounds a bit intimidating, but I wanted to show you a real example. This is not simplified at all, of how this vulnerability works, in order for you to understand that it might be a very fancy research group that found it, but it's not that hard to understand. So the way the vulnerability works is actually a series of bugs in a software that eventually leads to full control over a system. Now, the first two bugs that were found in a function of Windows, which is a function written by Microsoft for the operating system. And it's called, I don't know how to read it, a very long name of a very niche function. And the first mistake, or the first bug in that function, is doing a wrong casting of a number. So in case you're not that familiar with low-level programming, you can make an equivalent of division by 0, for example. But this is an example of a mistake that does not necessarily crash the program. And the second bug here is using that wrongly cast number in order to allocate memory for the software. So these two bugs, which I hope some of you may have encountered before in your various programming endeavors, and 10 more bugs following these two bugs, actually led to full control over a computer system remotely. So this is an example of a real used and very bad vulnerability that somebody used. But then you may ask, how did they know this? Like, this is so arbitrary. How did they know this specific vulnerability? And the secret is that most of the programs that people write have bugs. Even the people who say they don't have bugs, they do. And the whole idea here is that you have to look for them. So term number 4 would be reverse engineering, which is a research method for finding these bugs. So what you need to do to reverse engineer and find a vulnerability is, first of all, take the compiled file of the software that you are looking for a vulnerability in. For example, take the calculator provided by Windows. So you take that compiled file, and the second step is you throw it into a disassembler. So I will explain what it is in a second, but in a title, or maybe in one sentence, what a disassembler does, it's taking the compiled code that is not readable to us at all, and it translates it to a machine language that humans can read as well. So in case you don't remember or you're not familiar with assembler, I wanted to give an illustration. So here at the top, you see source code, which is very beautiful, very readable. You can see the different functions, the very informative naming, and it's very easy to read. And then down at the bottom, you see bits and bytes, which is not readable to us humans. We cannot understand what the computer is reading. But there is something in between that is called assembler, that is a language that has a lot of meaning for us regarding programming, but it's just not as beautiful and easily read as source code. So you can see here on the right, it has a lot of actions. It can also provide us with functions and loops, and you can understand it. You just need to be a little bit more trained to read that, but it's a programming language, and you can actually follow coding logic on this code. So after you throw it into the disassembler, what you do is you analyze the code that you are seeing. And you're looking for specific code that interests you, or you're looking for mishandled cases, for empty values, for misusage of functions. You're looking for the most common bugs that we all can know and love from our previous knowledge. And I wanted to give an example of reverse engineering. And I wanted to give that specifically because I want to encourage each and every one of you who thinks it's interesting to try it for yourselves. And I'm going to give a shout out to one of our members from our community, to a dear member called Afir Arpaz, who wrote that blog. And it goes like this. So first, she took the game Minesweeper, which I hope most of you know from Windows. And her mission was to hack it in a way that once it starts up, it shows the solution on the screen of the game. So she took the compiled file, she threw it into the disassembler. You can actually see the real screenshot of the disassembler, a part of it, code from Minesweeper that she used. And she had a strategy for hacking this game. So first, she wanted to find the functions that draws the flags. Now, mind you, these are not named functions, so you have to go over the logics and find it yourself. And then she wanted to find the functions that draws the board. And then she wanted to find a way or a cavity that she can use to make the board draw and call the draw the flags function. So once it starts up and draws the board, it actually draws all the flags. Now, in this very beautiful blog, she explained how she did it and how she found it. So I encourage you to read that blog if you're interested. I loved reading it myself. And this brings me to term number 5. So let's say you did some very elaborate research to find this vulnerability. Sometimes this vulnerability can be called a Zeroday. So a Zeroday is a vulnerability that is not known or not addressed by those who should be mitigating the vulnerability. So let's say you found a bug, and it's something that Microsoft wrote. You can report it to Microsoft, and they can correct the code and close that bug. So that would happen if you are a very nice person and you want to help the community. But let's say that you're a very eager attacker and you want to be able to get to as many computers as possible. You want to infect as many machines as you can. If you actually found a vulnerability in a very popular service, such as Gmail or Facebook or Twitter, something very popular, you have a reason not to share it because you're essentially able to infect a lot of machines. So vulnerabilities that are not known are called Zeroday, and they can be worth a lot of money to a lot of people, either the company that made the software or the attackers that found it. So this is why maybe sometimes you'll see people walking around with that face of being very happy they found this specific vulnerability. Okay, so we understood how a malware got to our computer. We understood that a malware might have gotten to us in a phishing email that we double-clicked, and someone maybe found a vulnerability in the PDF reader that once I'm actually opening a PDF file, it's also installing a software on my machine and making it run because they found a vulnerability. So, okay, let's say the malware is running on my computer now. Now what? So now, much like a client-server architecture, the attacker wants to be able to communicate to its client, to its malware. So term number 6 is a command and control server. What the server does is, much like a client-server architecture, it's just giving commands to the malware and waiting for the data to be sent back in return. Let's say the malware that I designed or that attacker specifically designed genuinely likes to invade your privacy. So the command and control server can give a command to the malware, dear malware, I want you to take a photo of the person that I infected the computer of. So the malware takes a photo and then sends the data back to the server. So this entire communication happens because there is a command and control server. So now let's scale it up. We like to think big. So let's say we were able to infect a lot of computers with the same malware. So let's say all these computers with the same malware also communicate to the same command and control server. This is what we would call a botnet, which is a network of bots. I wanted to give an example of a really widespread botnet called Mirai. And personally, Mirai affected my life because I research it quite often. So it infected more than 500,000 devices at its peak. And it's targeting mainly IoT devices. So it can be your smart TV, your printer, smart home appliances, Alexa, your smart watch, whatever it is. And usually those IoT devices have a lot more vulnerabilities and are easier to find because usually the software isn't that large enough to be maintained well. And we will get back to Mirai. But then I wanted to explain a term, I call this 7.5 because this is almost the term I want to share with you. So first I want to tell you about denial of service. And I'll actually make it a bit more relevant right now. So imagine you're trying to access a service and a lot of people are trying to access a service at the same time. For example, if you're trying to order groceries from Shufersal online right now and you can't and the website is down, it's because the service is so flooded and so overwhelmed with the amount of requests that it can't serve all of the legitimate requests as it is. And imagine that someone is being so evil that they are sending malicious requests, like requests that are not from legitimate customers to the service, just so that all the legitimate requests would be overlooked. So this is a denial of service attack, an attacker trying to bring down or disrupt the service by overflooding it. And since we just thought about scale, imagine that you can do this attack in a scaled way, which is distributed. So you don't need to have this mega machine that can go and have a lot of bandwidth out and send it to the service. You can just have a lot of different computers sending a very low bandwidth, but combining them all to the same service, it's achieving the same goal. So this is a distributed denial of service, and this is term number 8. And I wanted to give an example. I explained to you about Mirai botnet. So Mirai botnet had attacked a service called DIN DNS, which some of you may know. And DIN DNS was actually a very essential service that hosted a lot of services that we are all using, like Netflix and Amazon, Airbnb, Spotify, PayPal, Twitter, you name it, all of the big names. And Mirai attacked that service in such an efficient way that the service was down for an entire day. And because of that, Netflix and some of those other services were seriously disrupted or even down for a few hours. And the attack was so successful that DIN lost $110 million that day. And they lost a lot of customers, which is horrific, I think. And if we think about the attackers' goals, let's say they were coming from financial backgrounds, or they wanted to financially do some cyber warfare, and maybe this is the competitor of DIN, I think this is a very successful way to take out your competitor. So I think this is one of the most awful attacks I've ever seen, and it was very successful, sadly. So we understand that there can be some very bad things from being infected with a malware. You can essentially be a part of taking down Netflix in a way. So how do I protect myself from that? I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be a part of cyber warfare, and I don't want anyone to be able to take a photo of me sitting in front of my computer. So term number 9 is antivirus, which I hope most of you know. And I gave an example of a few very known software of it. So Kaspersky, AVG, McAfee, Avast, Symantec. And what an antivirus does, it's a computer program that is used to prevent, detect, and remove malware. And how it does that is by routinely scanning all of the files on your computer and looking for indications that this file is malicious. So it has a lot of signatures and a lot of strings that they're looking for to mark that this file specifically is malicious. And imagine how CPU intensive it is to go over all of the source code of all of the files on your computer. So this is why this is my favorite meme here, that I'm not sure if my computer is slow because I have a virus or because of the antivirus, because it's very CPU intensive. And what it does, once it finds a malicious file, it quarantines it, maybe it deletes it, but it prevents it from running on your computer. And term number 10 is the equivalent of that, but in a network perspective. So this is a firewall. A firewall is a device that is monitoring your network traffic and is looking on all of the communication that is going out and in of your computer, and is looking for indications of malicious communication and then dropping that communication. So this "you shall not pass" is a real true form that the firewall can actually block communication. And if we explain the malware in the command and control server beforehand, here we can see that this specific device is aimed to block this kind of communication. And specifically, my line of work is designing tools to find malicious communication in the network traffic, much like a firewall. So I wanted to do a recap of what we covered so far and how to use all of these terms in your daily conversations. So we learned what is a malware, and we learned how phishing is used to deliver this kind of malware to your computer. We also learned about vulnerabilities and sometimes maybe even zero-day vulnerabilities that are found using reverse engineering and that are exploited to abuse your machine and to execute something that is not authorized. We learned that a command and control server is used to control those malwares and these botnet to leverage an infected machine and to create these joint massive attacks, such as a denial of service attack. And we learned that an antivirus and a firewall are some of the ways to defend yourselves from getting infected or potentially being a part of this cyber warfare. So this is it. The cyber is very hot right now. If you're interested in anything I said, you're interested in trying to join the cybersecurity field, and you feel that this is really interesting to you, I encourage you to do so. I'm a firm believer that everything is possible to learn yourselves, especially if you're interested. So this is my contact. Feel free to use it. I'm also on the Baot group. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Amazing.
So, יש איזה שאלות? אני רגע אסתכל, או שלמישהי יש שאלה יכולה פשוט לשאול.
ממליצה לשאול בקול כדי שגם נראה אתכן.
כן, ותעזרו לי מהבידוד כזה להרגיש לא לבד.
אוקיי. אז תודה שהצטרפתן, נתראה פעם הבאה.
תודה לכולן.